Super Mario Bros. Is a series of video games where you hit floating blocks, jump on turtles, save princesses, and make the same joke for over a decade. Nintendo's Mario has to be the most recognizable video game character of all time, comparable to Disney's Mickey Mouse. Except I hate Disney for the soulless, money-hungry overlord that it is. And of course Nintendo can't be anything like that, since they have Mario. Century-old corporate overlord is my friend, and I love them. Just like Google. Google, who is my friend too, and is amazing. The Super Mario series is magical, fun, consistent, sometimes too consistent, and full of games that deserve to be celebrated. I'd do anything for Mario. Anything. So why don't we look through each of his main 2D games to see what they brought to the table, but also see how they impacted the series and why they still stand out to this day. We'll start with the original Super Mario Bros. Back all the way from the NES, and make our way to present day with the plumber's newest game, Search Engine Optimization 2. Now, I'm not going to say that Shigeru Miyamoto created video games when he and his small team designed the original Super Mario Bros. I'm also not here to say that Mario was the first game with side-scrolling, or the first side-scrolling platformer. Heck, Pac-Land came out a year before Super Mario did. God, that game sucks though. But what they did create was something truly captivating that stuck out in the gaming landscape at the time. Super Mario Bros. Is a game about a short, chubby Italian man going through a strange array of obstacle courses in order to retake fortresses in order to get to the ultimate goal of saving Princess Toadstool from the clutches of King Koopa and his black magic. This short, chubby Italian man who is also killing innocent toads along the way that had been turned into floating blocks. This has never been brought up again in the history of Mario, by the way, and neither has this elusive Mushroom King that's apparently the dad of Princess Toadstool. Alas. Before Mario's big focus was on platforming, it was apparently on shooting, and Mario was going to have guns like rifles and beam guns. But they decided against that, thank God. I can't imagine Mario with a gun. What makes this original game so special is that it manages to capture the essence of adventure as you explore a diverse kingdom. You'll be going through bushy plains with mountains in the background, dark underground caverns, or mushrooms that reach to the sky. You'll be swimming through entire oceans. You'll be going through day and night. You'll be climbing into the very heavens until the last level of each of the 8 worlds where you'll face one of the King Koopa's castles, totaling to 32 levels of pure platforming bliss. Rather than just throwing enemies and other obstacles about at seemingly random, we have carefully crafted memorable levels that still stand out over 30 years later. Trying to impede on your journey are obvious faces that any one of us would be able to recognize, like Goombas, Koopa Troopas, Cheep Cheeps, Hammer Brothers, and so on. Enemies aren't the only thing that keep you on your toes as you play. The game also incentivizes looking around for secrets or power-ups. These could be as simple as certain blocks that may give you an ever-helpful fire flower, or they could be hidden invisible blocks or pipes with coins that may give you the extra lives you will need in order to reach the end of the game. Since, you know, this was back when lives meant something. If you look around hard enough, you'll be able to find areas that allow you to skip ahead a few worlds. These were good for players either trying to get through the game as quickly as possible, or for players who were trying to get back to a certain point in the game after they got a game over. Because not everyone knew you could just hold the A button on the title screen to get back to the world you got game over on. Mario's controls are based off of him gaining momentum by running. Something kept in mind in the level design so that skilled players would be able to easily run past every obstacle. This would be something to help incentivize multiple playthroughs as you try to learn the course designs and how best you can get past them. Even though some people may be spoiled by Mario's later games that do have superior controls, may find this original outing to be a bit stiff in comparison, the two concepts of control and design were well thought out and work in harmony together for this original game. Miyamoto put a lot of thought into the first level and how the game would quickly teach things to the player on how to play, considering everything the player would be thinking and feeling. And this mindset would also be present in how he would go on to design the rest of the game, with such careful attention to the craft. As a kid who grew up with the NES original, since I had one of those Chinese bootleg plug-and-play consoles with pirated NES games on them, don't tell Nintendo! It felt like there were endless possibilities as I went through the levels. It just felt so magical, and those memories will forever stay with me. I've played this game so many times through its many different forms that it's muscle memory just going through the entire game. And let me tell you, Super Mario Bros. 1 has a lot of different versions. The sheer amount of versions and re-releases Super Mario Bros. 1 has makes even Skyrim jealous. Miyamoto and his team had set out to make something different than what had been done before. They targeted the scope of what it would feel like to help take back an entire kingdom in peril, over the course of a variety of stage types filled to the brim with secrets. They did so much with so very little, while keeping in mind the player's thoughts and sense of discovery. And not only did they succeed, but they helped rejuvenate the dying American video game market that had crashed in 1983, creating an icon that just about anyone and their mom can recognize. So naturally, the original Super Mario Bros. Was a huge success. Obviously. To capitalize on this sudden interest the Japanese people had with Super Mario, Miyamoto and his team crunched for a sequel within the span of merely 4 months. As such, the game, well, it looks and plays nearly identical to the first. There were some slight tweaks to the physics of the game, and there were some graphical alterations here and there, adding slightly more detail. Slightly. But overall, it comes off as some ROM hack or altered version of the original Super Mario Bros. Rather than a full-blown sequel. However, this time, Miyamoto knew that people had gotten a grasp on what Mario was. He didn't need to teach people the basics again. He knew that players would have played the levels over and over from the original. Thanks to this, Miyamoto's design philosophy for Mario 2 would be to craft a game with experienced players in mind. These levels would be far more difficult than the original Super Mario Bros., sometimes demanding near perfect jumps and timing. Some people even describe these levels as masochistic. Even as a Mario veteran and someone who has beaten this game multiple times throughout multiple versions, some of these levels still make me feel anxious at times. And I'm not sure if I like that they still manage to do that or not. In Super Mario Bros. 1, there would be occasional puzzles in the castle levels, such as go in the right pathways, or in the case of the very last castle, go down the correct pipe, and then go in the correct pipe again, and then go in the correct pipe again. In Super Mario Bros. 2, you had exactly those types of puzzles, but also just in the normal levels, you had to figure out secrets to even progress through the flagpole. Levels would sometimes feel overly aggressive towards the player because of this, or because of some secrets that would lead to warp zones that would take you backwards. This would honestly make me hesitant to try to go down pipes or go up vines because I didn't want to actively put my trust into the game when I felt it was very much against me. Taking the player from World 8 to World 5? Kinda a dick move. Adding on top of that, you have the implementation of mushrooms that would hurt Mario instead of powering him up, and also faster moving red piranha plants that would appear out of the pipes even if you stand next to them, unlike the previous green piranha plants. It all makes for an experience that takes Mario and really challenges you on the fundamentals of the games. As a kid, there was something satisfying about beating a challenge like this, even though you would have to try a lot of times in order to do it. Since this game was known to me not as Super Mario Bros. 2, but instead Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, the game felt like exploring an unknown uncharted land. As goofy, comedic, and stupid as this sounds because I'm talking about stupid fucking NES game, but little dramatic. These levels being something that not all players were able to see or get through due to the difficult and adverse nature of the game. It's impressive what Miyamoto and his team were able to do in a mere 4 months of development time, especially when you consider that, unlike the first Mario, there was no recycled levels throughout the 8-world campaign of Mario 2. The first Mario having quite the number of recycled levels. While still being so similar to the first Mario, all this makes Mario 2 stand out enough to appeal to its own crowd, and is able to capture some of its own magic. But not just for these reasons alone. This was the first time in which Luigi was given his iconic higher jump and slippery controls. These attributes not only made him feel and played very differently from Mario, but would give experienced players a new way to approach levels. And if you were a real hardcore gamer and beat the game without using a single warp zone, you would be treated to a bonus world, World 9. When you're greeted with this new world, you'll notice it's called a fantasy world, and that's because it isn't a world with proper levels. It's more like a treat for dedicated players. After you would have had to have gotten intimately familiar with the fundamentals of Mario in order to get to this world, World 9 throws those fundamentals out the window. The first level is an overworld level that's for some reason underwater. Weirdly enough, the third level, not the fourth, is the castle level in this world, in which there's a pipe that you can go in that takes you to the clouds for some reason, even though there's no pipe you're coming out of. What were they thinking? Drugs?
Oh my god!
There's also a good bit of empty space in these levels, like the castle level not even having any enemies or obstacles other than the Bowser at the end. But again, these aren't meant to be real levels, but rather a strange experience as a reward. These levels would be reminiscent of something that's somewhat popular nowadays, where people corrupt their favorite games in order to see strange, surreal things in them and gain a sense of enjoyment you wouldn't get by just playing them normally. As such, World 9 is little more than merely bragging rights and just a fun, weird experience. But if you manage to beat the game a total of 8 times, then you go to the title screen and hold down A before you select to play as either Mario or Luigi. You then unlock 4 more worlds. Worlds A, B, C, and D. And these aren't just weird glitchy worlds again. These are 4 worlds with brand new proper levels to play. That is insane. A couple of these levels have segments that are lifted from levels from the main campaign, but it's not as though whole levels were lifted. And there are only a couple examples of this. Aside from that, these are brand new levels. I cannot express just how crazy that is. Imagine you're just playing your favorite game of all time, nonchalantly. You've played and beaten it, just shy of a dozen times or so, but suddenly you unlock 50% more content than you thought was originally in the game.
That's magical.
When you look at achievement statistics that show how many people actually bother to beat a video game, they're usually pretty low percentages. So imagine designing an extra 50% worth of game content to the very few people who beat your game 8 times. The amount of heart for the craft is palpable here. Whoever had the idea to do that has my absolute respect. One last thing I want to bring up before we move on to the next game. I just really wanted to bring up... Wait. Pause. Go back a second. Yeah. This Blue Bowser guy. So you see at the end of each world in Mario 1 and 2, there would be a Bowser to defeat. However, these, except for the Bowser in the respective game's World 8, are fake Bowsers. These fake Bowsers are common enemies costumed to appear as Bowser. You can see what they really are if you defeat them with Fire Mario. Regardless, these costume Bowsers are all identical to the real Bowser. But this Bowser, this Blue Bowser, this guy's different. As such, according to conflicting sources, he could very well be Bowser's twin brother. I've been playing Mario games all my life, but I'm only just now finding out about this. The fact that somewhere out there, Bowser might have a twin brother. This is messing with my mind more than it has any reason to. The answer was right in front of us all along. Even Sakurai knew. From Super Mario Bros. 2, we move on to our next game, Super Mario Bros. 2. Or as it's known in Japan, Super Mario USA. It's called that because...
The original Super Mario Bros. 2, the one released in Japan, both looked and played a lot like the original, but there was one huge difference. It was far more difficult. In fact, the level designs were borderline cruel at times, demanding a degree of platforming prowess we Americans apparently lacked. Concerned the game was just too tough, Nintendo of America canceled the release.
When Nintendo of America requested a more accessible sequel to Super Mario Bros., Nintendo of Japan saw Doki Doki Panic as a potential answer.
To solve the sequel problem Nintendo of America wanted solved, Nintendo of Japan took Doki Doki Panic and gave it a Super Mario makeover.
If you compare both these games side by side, you'll see it's the exact same video game.
Now, I feel pretty dorky even talking about Doki Doki Panic because it's literally something that takes up pretty much a quarter of any script covering this game.
Super Mario 2 manages to simultaneously feel like a natural expansion from the foundation that the first game laid out, but also a complete departure from it. There are no Goombas or Koopa Troopas. Instead, we have a whole new army of baddies like Shy Guys, Sniffits, or Tweeters. We're no longer in the Mushroom Kingdom saving Toads or a princess. Now we're in the kingdom of Subcon, saving its inhabitants, known as Subcon. And we're saving them from the clutches of our new antagonist, Wart, among other bosses like Birdo, who we fight at the end of most every stage. In Mario 2, you don't merely jump on enemies to defeat them, you have to jump on them, pick them up, and then throw them into another enemy, and that's the only proper way to defeat a standard enemy. Instead of super mushrooms or fire flowers, we have an upgradable health bar and vegetables that you can pull from the ground. You gain more max health by finding a red potion from the ground and strategically throwing it, making a door appear. On the other side of this door is a sort of parallel dimension, where if you enter from the right spot, you can find mushrooms that add one more heart to your max health. Although your health goes back to 2 by the time you enter a new level, so you'll always be on the search for more mushrooms. Some of these mushrooms can be annoying to find and make you feel like you just wasted a potion if you're not able to pick the right spot for the door, but there are typically cues in the level design to give you hints at where one might be. In this parallel dimension, what would normally be vegetables in the normal world becomes coins that you can use in a slot machine minigame after every level, and this gives you a chance to get more lives. There are also mushroom blocks, which can be used as either weapons or platforms to get higher. Instead of getting invincibility stars out of question blocks, you have to collect 5 cherries to then unlock a slowly ascending Starman that you can hopefully nab and isn't just stuck off screen, just in a wall. There are no pipes in Mario 2. Instead, there are vases in which we can go in instead to find various items. Or in certain cases, working in tandem with a well-placed potion, some vases may work as a warp zone, springing you ahead a few worlds into the game, much like Mario 1's warp zones. You've probably noticed in the gameplay shown I have not been playing as Mario. And that's because in this game, you have a selection of 4 playable characters, and each have their own attributes. Mario is the most basic and well-rounded playstyle, with his jump and speed being average. Luigi is a bit more slippery than Mario, but jumps higher. Toad can hardly jump worth of anything, but he's incredibly fast. And Peach is slower, but has her floating ability that makes her go through the levels much easier. I've heard others say that for people who know the game inside and out, that Toad and Luigi are the superior characters to play as to get through the levels as efficiently as possible, but I don't care. I will always play as Peach. Her floating ability may make some of the platforming bits child's play, but she's simply just the most fun to play as out of the 4. Regardless, for a game released in 1988, it's impressive to see a cast of playable characters that are tuned to noticeably different playstyles. Level design philosophies have also changed a bit, now that there were some advancements in the understanding of the NES hardware. Before, in Mario 1, levels would mostly consist of one singular section. There may be 1 or 2 extra smaller sections, but the main level would only be one long stretch to get all the way to the right. But now, Mario 2 incorporates several sections for a single level, making them much lengthier now. Rather than having only horizontal levels, some portions of levels may also be vertical now. These vertical sections allowing the player to jump between the left and right of the screen as needed as well. All this would add whole new possibilities for level design the original Mario just wasn't capable of. As these levels are now longer, they removed the timer from the original game. This would help the player go at their own pace as they explore, and in some levels, they might be able to find multiple paths that lead to the same end. Not only that, but the number of levels goes down from the original 32 to 20 levels. That may not sound like a lot, but thanks to the level length and difficulty, this feels like a good amount of levels as the game doesn't overstay its welcome. While the original NES version of Mario 2 has its own charm, the best version of the game is by far the 2001 release Super Mario Advance on the Game Boy Advance. This would take the base game of Mario 2 but add so much more polish to the experience. On top of the obvious graphical upgrades, they added more enemies, 5 collectible ace coins to every level, a brand new boss, and the ability to rip off Red and Green Birdo's bow. Why does that last one matter at all? I don't know. It doesn't. I just like pointless polish, okay? They also add in way more replenishable hearts, which makes the game much more welcoming for beginners, but for me, I had no idea what to do with all the hearts the game would just keep throwing at me. I would have appreciated a harder difficulty mode to offset this and get rid of most of them, but a hard mode in Mario game? That's hard to make, apparently, because we don't have it. Ever. But it would be great, because I also had way more lives than I knew what to do with as well. I think I was pretty safe from ever getting a game over. After you beat Super Mario Advance, you're given the extra quest to go find 2 Yoshi eggs in each of the levels. All of these eggs exist within the parallel dimension behind the red potion doors, and can be a bit tricky to find, but this gives the players a reason to keep playing the levels over and over again. They also added this blue spike thing that does whatever that is. You can't kill it, and touching it at all hurts you, of course, because it's a gigantic spike. But why is it here? It only appears once in the entire game, in this particular vase, in this one specific level. But it doesn't even act as an obstacle. You would think it's there to poke at a player from underneath as they ride the Ferris wheel, but it's not even timed to properly pierce through the platforms. So it just sits there, presumably waiting for the player to just walk into it. It's rather baffling to me why they bothered to make it and put it in here at all when it accomplishes astonishingly nothing. Super Mario Bros. 2 is pretty split in the fan base. Some love it, some don't like it at all. My editor, in fact, seems to kinda hate the game. Kane, would you care to come in and tell us why you don't like it?
Because it feels like a knockoff. It doesn't even feel like a real Mario game. It's different and icky and
okay.
weird, and it's just
Alright, I get. Moving on. Regardless of the split, it's undeniable that it's still held a strong influence on the Mario series as a whole. Without this strange little diversion from the norm, we never would have gotten now iconic enemies including, but not limited to, Shy Guys, Pokies, and Bob-Ombs. So even if you don't like Mario 2, Kane...
No, it's not even that I don't like it, it's just
I feel it's only appropriate to at least respect the game for bringing in more creative enemies into the series. It's just a shame we never see Wart again in the history of anything, except for a reference in Link's Awakening. But I guess it does make sense when you consider that after you defeat Wart, he's bleeding out of his eyes before a whole society of fairy people beat him to a pulp. Just kidding, it was just a dream. It's just a dream. As revolutionary as Mario 1 was at the time, things were still rather simplistic. A criticism some may have for Mario 1 is that many of the levels felt too similar, even outside of the obvious reused levels. This obviously was due to the hardware being newer and the developers were still trying to work within their limitations. So in order to add some variety to a stage, they had just make it gray. Bam! Completely new and different for you. New. This is variety, just slightly different color. What I'm trying to say is that while Mario 1 had succeeded in its goal of trying to feel like a whole journey through an entire kingdom, and it did well within the limitations it had, what Mario 3 set out to do was to fully realize the potential of the NES hardware. The Mushroom Kingdom wasn't just brown blocks, blue blocks, gray castles. The Mushroom Kingdom was suddenly 8 distinct lands, most of which are now staples of your average Mario game today. We have Grassland, Desert Land, Waterland, Giant Land, Skyland, even though half of it is not in the sky, Iceland, Pipeland, and lastly Bowser's Domain, which is called Darkland, each with their own distinct music, feel, enemies, and gimmicks to make them stand out and memorable. The goal of each world is essentially the same as the first game, of course, going through levels with platforming challenges to get to the end castle to save the kingdom from the dark magic of King Koopa. But now, to cap off each world, we have a brand new type of level, airships, with worlds 1 through 7 featuring not Bowser as their boss, but one of the brand new Koopalings, who are King Koopa's adopted children. But there's way more to talk about in the ways Mario 3 builds upon the strong foundation Mario 1 created. So let's first talk about Mario's transformations in Mario 3. It wouldn't be a Mario game without them. The series, Super Mario Bros., is after all named after the mustachioed plumber's ability to grow big after consuming a power-up. From Mario 1 to 3, we have a huge jump in Mario's possible arsenal of items at his disposal. We have the Super Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Invincibility Star from the first game, but we also have the new Super Leaf to turn Mario into a flying raccoon, given that he has enough running space to lift off. The Tanuki suit, which acts as a more superior but rarer version of Raccoon Mario. The Frog suit, which allows Mario to swim underwater with ease. The The hammer suit, which gives Mario the ability to throw hammers at enemies, much like the dreaded Hammer Brother himself. And finally, the P-Wing, which allows Mario to fly in the air indefinitely until they either beat the stage or get hit by an enemy. While this last power-up is, of course, the most overpowered, there's only a few given out to the player during the game as rewards, so it balances out. The Super Leaf is the big takeaway item for Mario 3. A player is able to use it to traverse stages with ease, using their tail to defeat enemies, break blocks, or float down gently to make platforming easier. Or again, with enough running space, Mario can count on the power of flight to get past difficult obstacles or to find new secrets in all new paths. The rarer Tanuki suit has all the abilities that Raccoon Mario has with the Super Leaf, while also giving him the ability to transform into a statue, thus becoming immune from damage for a few seconds. Both of these power-ups are beloved by fans, which is probably why Nintendo loves bringing them back in later games, to pander to us, constantly. The frog suit, while making water levels far more enjoyable by making them go by faster, isn't very good. On land it becomes absolutely worthless as you can't run or walk. You hop, which is slow and cumbersome to control. It's inevitable that you'll get hit by something and lose it, but that'll only come as a relief by that point. Aside from some water levels and some very specific secrets that require this suit, there's not much reason to use it. The hammer suit is another fan favorite. Why that may be is probably due to how few there are in the entire game, but how satisfying it is to be able to fling hammers across the screen at enemies. Adding on to that, this power-up, unlike the Raccoon or Tanuki suit, has never appeared in another Mario game. It's like a rare element that has to be delicately mined, polished, taken care of, and preserved in a museum for future generations. And I lost it! Great! Good! Now there's only like 4 of them in the entire game, and I just lost it. Cool! And while it may not appear in any other Mario game, it seems as this power-up does have a spiritual successor in Mario Maker 2. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Also, Fire Mario is all orange in this game. In every other game in this series, ever, Fire Mario always has his white and red outfit. Even in Mario 1, or the later ports of this game, he has his usual white and red outfit. Such a drastic change, but it makes me really grow fond of this oddity that is purely orange Mario. It's the little things like that that still make the original NES version of the game worth going back to, even with the superior Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance ports. This is another really pointless thing that I love that's exclusive to the NES version, but I'll share it with you anyway because it's my video. I can talk about what I want. Since the developers clearly wanted to differentiate the tone of the ice world from other worlds that have blue skies, like the summery, warm grass world, they added white stripes to the background, which seems like a strange choice giving the sky stripes, but it certainly gives the world a different vibe and helps make it feel much more harsh and wintry. And I like that, more than I have any particular reason to. All of these power-ups are available not only for your disposal, but also for your hoarding needs. You're able to keep an inventory of dozens of items, which you can use before you start a level, picking out which one you would think would best suit your situation for the level you're about to face. Speaking of this, now that we're on the screen, wha-bam! We now have this all-new overworld screen. For the first time in the series, you're not just going from level to level, but you are moving Mario himself to where you'd like to go, and which level you'd like to face next. Sometimes having the choice sprung onto you of which levels you would like to do, in what order, or which ones you just want to skip altogether. There's also other things on the world map to help break up the pacing a tad, with toad houses that give you more items for your inventory, a match minigame that I can never win to save my life, and all sorts of different Hammer Brothers, Boomerang Brothers, or Sledge Brothers, which also award you with new items. And speaking of items, we're not done talking about items, because there are items that can be used on the overworld map. Meet the Lone Hammer, which allows you to break certain rocks to open new paths to get you to new toad houses or allow you to skip a level. The Music Box, which puts overworld enemies to sleep so you can sneak right past by them. The Lakitu Cloud, which turns Mario into a cloud to be able to skip over a level the player might find too difficult. And the Warp Whistle, which acts as this game's warp zone. There are only 3 of them in the entire game, and they're all very well hidden. This item makes a little tune when you blow into it, which is a nod to the first Zelda game, which also has a whistle on it with that same tune, the warp whistle in Zelda, also warping Link around the map of Hyrule. Jesus Christ, Miyamoto, could you make a single game in the 80s without warp zones? There is so much. This game is constantly rewarding you for moving forward, be it with items or new rooms. The levels in this game are short, usually being beaten within a single minute. They throw you into one theme for a minute, only to throw it completely away forever after using it for such a brief time, only to do something else completely different in the next stage, and then they throw that away, and they do something different again in the next stage after that, and so on and so forth. An example of this is that there is a single stage with this exclusive power-up we never see again in another Mario game until Super Mario Maker 1, and that's the green Goomba shoe from World 5-3. Defeating a shoe to Goomba from below with a brick block allows the player to jump inside and be able to stand on blocks that would normally hurt Mario, or stomp on enemies that would otherwise be unstompable. But the second you beat the level, it's gone. You can't take it to any other level, and it just doesn't exist in any other level but this one. That's just like Nintendo, to come up with a cool concept that's fun and unique, but then immediately throwing it away before it gets too tiresome. Or in this case, throwing it away before fully realizing what level design could be produced from this sort of mechanic. Thankfully, they would later rectify this by bringing it back and using it in a unique way for an e-reader level, but it would have been nice to see the shoe appear in at least one more level in vanilla Mario 3. The pacing in this game is immaculate, with these stages having so many secrets in them to keep a curious player busy and ushering you into replaying the game over and over, while you're still able to find new things. There's a secret in 610 that I, for years, could never remember how to get to. Me, who has managed to memorize most of the secrets from all the 2D Mario games, have up until now gotten stumped time and again by Mario 3. In this one instance at least. There are enough secrets and alternate paths in this game to make each playthrough still feel fresh. Super Mario Bros. 3 somehow manages to hide its age very well. Aside from some screen flickering that's not present on the Switch emulation of this game, the game holds up remarkably well with its crisp, colorful, cartoony sprites that still look just as beautiful today as they did back then. Super Mario Bros. 3 and Kirby's Adventure remain the best looking NES games out of them all. It's honestly difficult for me to come up with gripes for this game, even minor nitpicks. It does so much to build off of what the original Mario did, while pushing ahead with so many new things that have become standard for Mario games to come. I suppose if I were to come up with one gripe, it would be that the bosses are too easy, aside from King Koopa, who still is a unique ending boss in how they executed it. But Boom Boom, the boss for every fortress level in the game, is an absolute joke. You can kill him without a problem in mere seconds. Some Boom Booms have different forms, like growing a pair of wings, but when you defeat them before they even have a chance to do anything, it's hard to take them seriously. But we cannot end this section on Mario 3 without talking about the two super secrets this game has. A couple of features of the game so stupidly obtuse to find that you could easily play through this game a dozen times and not even see either of them. That would be the white Toad House and the coin airship. For such small things that so few players would have experienced or even understand how to unlock, they must be worthwhile, right? So, the white Toad House. In order to unlock one of these, you must collect a certain number of coins, sometimes needing all the coins in the whole level. But this is only the case for certain levels in the game. One level per the first 7 worlds. The game gives you absolutely no indication that these secret Toad houses exist, or what levels would be the right one in order to unlock the houses from. It would all just have to happen from chance. That or you looking up online how to do it like I totally didn't do. In these Toad houses, you either get a P-Wing if it's an odd numbered world, or if it's an even numbered world, you get a super secret item, the anchor. These white Toad houses are the only way you can get the anchor too. You may be wondering what a super secret item like this may do, since it's only available if you stumble into collecting a certain number of coins in very specific levels of only the even numbered worlds, excluding the last world. But let me tell you, it's essentially worthless. For you see, when you get to the last level of each world, the airship, and you die, the airship will move somewhere else on the overworld map. Every time you die on the airship, it will keep moving, making it very extremely super duper mega miter inconvenient to get back to it, maybe. But if you do somehow manage to get and use this anchor item, then the airship will just stay in place. And that's all it does. So who cares? It's junk. Okay, thank you. Next super secret this game has, please. The coin airships. Alright. Breathe. In order to unlock a coin airship, you must first either be in worlds 1, 3, 5, or 6. A hammer brother must still be left alive on the overworld map. The player must end a stage, any stage, with a coin total that's a multiple of 11. The tens digit of the player's overall score must match the multiple of 11. i.e., if your coin total is 44, your 10 score digit must be 4. But since the player is awarded additional points for collecting the end card at the goal based on how much time you have left, each second giving the player an additional 50 points, you should try to hit the end card when your timer is an even number, so your additional awarded points will be a multiple of 100, thus not ruining your tens digit. And then, on the overworld map, the hammer brother will magically turn into a coin ship. The stage itself isn't much, but it is satisfying to collect so many coins at once. At the end, you face the bro foes and collect your reward as typical for an overworld enemy. So the main thing that's changed from all this is that you have a few more coins. Doing this on purpose doesn't necessarily amount to much, just like the white toad houses, but due to the oddly specific nature of these secrets, it does add more charm and magic to the overall experience. Especially if you were to imagine how it was back in the early 90s when this game came out in America. Being able to tell your friends about this totally wicked secret you've never seen before and aren't sure how you even got. And then they don't believe a word you're saying because they've never seen it, so you're totally just making it up, trying to be cool, probably. Making it up, just like what Miyamoto did with this whole game. Whoa! Mario 3 was just stage play since the game opens with curtains going up, ends with curtains going down. The end goals are off-stage setups. Platforms were held up by rope, or some were bolted to the background. And you could go behind the background like some stage extras. Whoa! Miyamoto, you did it again. Blowing my mind. Whoa, dude. It's so insane to see how many new things Mario 3 came up with that immediately became the standard for Mario games to do. New colorful power-ups, airship stages, the 7 Koopalings, mid-world fortresses with a boss, Mario 3's new enemies like Dry Bones, Boos, Thwomps, Chain Chomps, Munchers, Fire Snakes, among others. And again, the existence of the overworld, which is present in essentially every other 2D Mario game after this. This game was a big deal. While Americans were used to the idea of Mario changing things up thanks to our release of Super Mario Bros. 2, just imagine how mind-blowing this was for Japanese players when just 2 years prior they got a ROM hack sequel of Mario 1. Such a huge freaking jump between two. Oh my god. There is a lot to Mario 3, and I'm sure I could talk even more about it, but I think I got the gist across to you. There is an impressive amount of content and creativity in this game. It's no surprise that this game is many people's favorite Mario game, or that many others regard it as one of the best video games ever created. There was just so much love and passion put into this game, as it really pushed Mario as far as he could go on this old Nintendo Entertainment System. But now, my friends, it's finally time for us to leave the NES and jump forward. It's time to go up a generation to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.